At this time, we will begin with our first budget workshop. Our official public meeting does not start until after the workshop, so we'll do the pledge then. So we'll start with Mr. Kashera. Thank you very much.
Good evening. Eric, do you have any? We're just going to launch a little PowerPoint. Like every other year, the budget is an evolutionary document. We're bringing you tonight where we are on the administrative budget. Ultimately, this becomes the Board of Education's budget over the next 3 meetings and a month and a half as we go through a review of this. We're going to touch on the big picture of where we're at today and then also dive a little deeper into the facilities budget for tonight's workshop. And obviously, as all the time, as you have questions, we'll take those.
Wait.
Just your head.
You think?
Yeah, right there.
Okay, hopefully we'll start with the tax cap. One of the changes, having done this now for a few dozen years, is instead of building a budget based on the expenditure side of the budget, we're kind of limited on the revenue side. The revenues kind of limit where what the budget needs to come in at. This year was a unique year for us. Due to our debt service continuing while our building aid dropped, we actually have a tax levy, a tax cap of 4%. So when people kind of just generically kind of link to a 2% tax cap, well, that's part of the formula. You can see about halfway down the calculation, see 1.02. That's the 2%, but there's all those other calculations, one of them being the tax levy or the debt minus building aid. So our debt minus building aid is much higher this year, allowing us to, in effect, from 2.8 to $4.2 million. So that's the gap that brings us up to a 4% tax cap. We are not recommending, nor are we building the budget on 4%. We are building it on a 2% tax levy increase. Going through the budget, our biggest area, obviously, are salary and benefits. And actually, our trend, we kind of trended salaries at 3%, and that's pretty much where they came in. We'll go through a little bit of some of the salary parts of the budget on an upcoming slide. We got a benefit this year, which we alluded to back in the fall. Our teachers' retirement system rate has dropped. We'll show you a slide that shows it varies greatly over time. And actually, we built the budget on almost 0.75% higher TRS rate than we have to, because we know it's probably not going to stay where it is. Just the fact last year the stock market was flat or negative, and since returns on the investments matter so much, we would expect to see a bounce back in that area. The biggest area as far as percentage growth is transportation, and it really is 300 additional students, 18 additional schools, and it's never changing. I mean, from when we started the year to now, we have more schools that we're transporting to. The special ed needs and non-publics are the primary driving force for that. And unfortunately, we think that trend is probably going to continue in the future. That will be one of our larger growth areas. Yeah.
Do you want questions?
Yeah, whatever you got.
Looking at the slides?
Yeah,
okay.
sure.
I just had a quick question about benefits. Does the benefits also include medical? So the medical, the
Yes.
retirement, the ERS, the TRS,
Yes.
that's all in that number?
Yes. Health, we're projecting, as you know, the rates go change in January with the Empire Plan. So
Right.
we're building the budget based on a 5% increase next January. We were fortunate that January that just passed was much lower, and that's really what helped us. So we're also going to get fund balance from that because we budgeted more this year than we're going to spend on health.
And I'm thinking that they didn't raise the rates for the health insurance, because if you have Empire, you know that your co-pays now went up.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that next year, they might give us a bigger increase.
Yeah, so we are factoring 5. Before the budget's done, they keep sending out best estimates. We haven't got one yet because it's obviously 9 months into the future. But by the time April comes, we'll get our first inkling of what that number is. So we can obviously revisit that at that point. Yep.
Why are we spending less on special education this year as opposed to last year?
Really, because we're about $500,000 less in BOCES this year than what we budgeted. So even with growth in BOCES expenditures, we're just kind of factoring in that we had more than we needed this year. So even though we don't expect a drop in numbers placements, in effect, if we looked at this year's budget, we'd have a $500,000 gap. To the good news, that we're spending less than what we budgeted this year in special ed.
So we spent
For BOCES.
$500,000 less than what we needed.
This year. So next year, even though it's showing budget to budget a drop, it will be slightly higher. So, but that again is a $500,000 delta this year to the good. Again, that'll all go into fund balance as we close out the year. Building and grounds, which is what we'll highlight, we'll have more to speak to there, but we actually happy about some new initiatives that we can tout in that area. So budget, the expense side going up about 1.5%. Just a few things internally. We had to change our budget now, and we need to report to the state by building next year. So that kind of took us a few extra weeks to make sure everybody, and if they have split assignments, we're handling correctly. And we also did some rebalancing between buildings as we looked at that too, on things like supplies and textbooks and equipment to kind of have an equalized per pupil for that area. Staff changes. We have additional 2 teachers, bilingual grade 1 and an elementary guidance slot, both of those via mandates. We did reinstate the maintenance supervisor position. As you recall, we used to have a head of maintenance, and then we had, or head of facilities, and then we had a maintenance department, and a custodial. We elevated the head of maintenance, and now we're talking about, in effect, reinstating that position. We also think that'll help us a little bit with some overtime costs down the line, which we also reflected. And there was a request for an additional 1.0 technology person, a network specialist. I think we put in around $88,000 for that position. So it is a little higher end position. We have 3 retirements that we are not expecting to fill, and then an additional 4 FTE enrollment-based FTE reductions. Speak to.
A quick question, and I'm not sure if the question really is, if it's for you or if it's maybe for Ms. Weber. The one additional, or the one ad for elementary guidance, that's mandated.
That's a mandate. So there's new guidance regulations that require that all elementary school students have access to a guidance counselor.
Okay.
There's a lot of gray area in terms of what that means, access to a guidance counselor. But we haven't formally finished our plan yet, but we wanted to put into the budget the need that we would need in elementary.
So this would be one elementary guidance counselor that's responsible for all 5 elementary schools?
Yes, it would not be one per school.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
I have a quick question. It's just not clicking in my head. Maybe it's something really, really easy, but the enrollment-based FTE reductions, what is that?
With less kids, less students, less sections. We can get into, I know it's a little bit at the middle school and also at the elementaries is where we're noticing it. A year from now, as we're projecting the middle school, you'll see even more of an enrollment drop. And this is just straight line, just take the 5th graders, move them to 6th grade. Take the 4th graders and move them up. So
does this mean that we're going to need 4.25 less teachers?
Actually,
7.25
7.25 because the 3.0 retirements are being absorbed. They won't be filled.
Yeah, so we're at 7.25.
So you're talking about layoffs of teachers?
Potentially, depending on what happens between now and the end of the year, either more retirements. There could be specific people that are affected, yes.
Okay, so I have a question about that because we've had this dropping enrollment trend that's been continuing for years now, and we haven't laid off staff in a very long time. Why now?
Most of the people that were laid off in 2013, only one of them has been reinstated. So the positions we've lost since 2013 were positions that we essentially didn't have probationary employees in at the time. In addition, we've had retirements. I mean, that's a big piece of it, is retirements. And there's one other factor.
How many retirements did we have last year?
I don't know off the top of my head.
Teresa?
6 maybe? It was higher than last year. 6 sounds about right.
Some of which were filled.
Yeah.
Some are high school, and they were filled.
So that's not how we did it
Oh,
before.
also, we had 2 teachers who were in the elementary tenure area who filled openings in other tenure areas to avoid being laid off, who will come up for tenure, I think, next year in their new tenure area. So they vacated their elementary positions in order to increase their job security.
Did we hire new teachers for the foundations class in Cherry Lane?
The special education, yes. So the
One
special
of these is special
education.
ed, right?
Yes,
One of these-
yes.
One of these is special ed.
Special education hires, while, because of the classes we've brought back, we have a higher need for special ed teachers than we have for general ed teachers.
And their salaries start off higher than Janet, right? No?
No. It's based on their experience. It has nothing to do with their tenure area.
How does it work when you recommend 4.25 full-time employees down? How would that work out?
There are some part-time employees
So you're recommending
that could be impacted.
a number of people?
Yeah, we can provide per building, and if there's actually 1 or 2 other possible positions that are kind of on the cusp that are not even factored here, but we can show you by building where there are just less sections. And again, your middle school next year is next year, not the budget we're working on now, the 1920
But
budget,
these are
2021.
specific, they're not teacher-specific reductions, are they?
No, the position. There's
Position.
enrollment. You don't need as many teachers when you don't have as many kids.
Well, we've said that for years, but
And-
that was never the recommendation in any of the past budgets. So I'm
Right.
concerned, why now?
Okay, and so because in the past years, as I mentioned, we had 2 teachers move their tenure area. We had people retire. We had three positions essentially we created that were new positions, the 2 literacy specialists and the project-based learning specialists. Those are 3 positions we created. We had a couple other retirements that weren't filled over the years. And this year, it just comes out really with the small number of retirements and none of them being in the areas where we have a place for enrollment-based reductions. They don't match up with the tenure areas of the 3 retirees.
And you can't do this creative budgeting again this year like you did last year and previously?
Would you like to create other positions?
I don't know. Do you have any positions in mind like you did before?
I mean, we could, we can go.
Do you have any
The-
educational needs? That's my
Right.
question. I'm asking you.
I don't believe so. I was part of this decision, and I do believe we have a need for a bilingual grade 1 teacher, and I believe we have a need for an elementary guidance position.
I
And
think
we
this
can
year,
absorb the 3 retirements.
this year too, the retirements are probably lower than they've been in a very long time. 3 is a very low number for retirements, so that's probably why we're seeing a negative where before we kind of move people around, or they're,
This would be basically where an incentive would be beneficial.
for those 4.25 people.
Absolutely.
Yes, it would be.
Or else you take the last 4.25 teachers and you
They're in
say bye-bye.
different, they're in different tenure areas. They're not, so it's, if it was, it depends, it's not the last 4.25 people hired, because if one of the last 4.25 people hired was in an area, for example, ESL, we have a need for ESL. That's not one of our enrollment-based reductions. So it's not just the last 4 people hired.
But it's
It
the
has to do
last
with what
4
they teach.
In
in that
Yes.
what they teach. It's the
Yes.
last 4 people that have come in.
Yes, but they're not all necessarily for the same tenure area.
Right, but they're
Yeah.
probably the lowest paid on the totem pole.
Not lowest paid, but the lowest, they've been here the least. Yes.
Well, when you've been here longer, you usually get paid.
Right,
more.
but also some people come in at a higher.
Experience, right?
Yeah, exactly. That they're coming in at a higher rate when they have
Especially
special
special
ed.
education, right? And
Well, they could have a
being out.
master's degree versus still working on their
Right.
master's, so there's all kinds of factors. That's why I don't say lowest paid, it's the lowest seniority.
Right, but when we're hiring new teachers to come in for ESL, they're gonna have their master's degree usually, and they're gonna be higher paid. I mean, that's what we were been told.
Yeah.
When they're bilingual teachers, they get paid higher.
Well, they get paid higher because of their experience, not because simply they're bilingual.
I think that's the question I just asked you, and you said no.
Right,
It's based
and
on their
I'm
experience.
still saying no, it's based on their experience. So when they get hired on a step. The steps are exactly the same, no matter what your tenure area is, no matter what your certification area is. The only differential is what lane you're in, meaning bachelor's, master's, how many credits you have, and how many years of experience you
Yeah,
have.
because
That's
we're
the
told
only-
that they're usually in a higher lane than they would be regular.
So
Like a
if-
regular ed teacher that's not bilingual is gonna be in a lower lane than somebody who's
So-
got more credentials.
Often, folks who are hard to find have more experience in more competitive areas, tend to have more experience, and are harder to find.
And
Paul,
have
Hence, you have to
degrees.
pay them
Yes,
more.
Paul, I think you had a question?
Yeah, just, it's not a question, but 3.0 in the retirement line, that's as of March 5th.
Correct.
When is the date that teachers have to notify?
It
that
happened already.
It passed.
It passed
Only if
The
already?
they wish
date
to.
for the incentive passed.
Right,
They
for
can let
the
us know
incentive.
anytime up to June.
Well, yeah, but let's see, probably April 30th or whatever, they could let, so that they kind of.
There's there's no requirement if they're not availing themselves to a retirement benefit like an incentive. So
Right.
really, let us know any more than a normal time of
Mhm.
just these weeks, months.
All right, but there could also be teachers who transfer,
Yeah.
who decide, I'm traveling 45 minutes, I hate the snow, and all of a sudden they have an opportunity to move to Florida. Lots of luck, but, so they may leave, and then, once again, that 4.25 is dropped down to maybe 3.25 or 2.25 or whatever, so.
Right.
yeah.
That's why this is a
they'll
work
be
in
your
progress here.
Right.
They'll be your preferred eligibles too, over the
Yes,
next few
yes.
years. As positions open,
Yep.
under this scenario, those 4.25 will be your first ones coming back.
Right.
But yes, we're kind of monitoring that on a regular basis, and if there is any incentives, obviously that's going to change the
Yeah,
numbers.
thank you.
Teachers' retirement, these are the rates we're budgeting over the years, the actual rates, and then we're budgeting 9.8%. Realize right now, the rate that the retirement system is telling us is 8.86 for next year. So we know we're budgeting more in this line than what we're probably going to spend. So that two things will happen. We'll have money left over in next year's budget for what we didn't spend. That'll go to fund balance. But also, if the past is any trend, if those rates go back up to double-digit numbers, we'll be a little closer. Yes?
But if you're saving money, if you're budgeting these lines that I've seen that you've said that we saved 500,000 for BOCES, right?
Mhm.
Is that what you had said?
Right,
And
that's
then,
right.
and then you have teachers' retirement that you're budgeting at a certain rate and it's lower. Why couldn't we reposition that money and put it into salaries for teachers and not have layoffs? Like, why
It's-
would you overfund for certain things and then lay off teachers? Because to me, that's, you don't want to lay off a teacher.
It depends how low the class sizes are that you want to fund. I mean, really, it's your call. I mean, but we're at the point now where I alluded to, there could be two more reductions than what you see here,
So I
based on the
think really-
numbers. So, I mean, we'll get you specific classes and the numbers,
That, we
but you'll
have-
see
yeah.
these
You
are
have it-
very
you
low
have it now.
numbers.
These are very favorable class sizes. If you
These
would
are-
like us to create 4 more sections, people will cheer loud. I mean, there'll be a great loud cheer
But-
for that. but-
But there are-
Redistricting would make sense. If you have classes that are more in certain areas and classes with less, I mean, you're saying put a Band-Aid on it. Well, I'd rather put a Band-Aid on it and save the jobs of these teachers than to lay anybody off. I mean, that's just my personal opinion.
Give us the direction of how small do you want to go?
If
We
we're-
need
not
the
the-
if we're
numbers
adding-
before we could give
You
direction.
have the numbers.
No, the classroom sizes, those are not the numbers I'm asking for. The classroom sizes we've asked for by section and by building piece, we really need those. Thank you.
I was under the understanding you had those.
we required more detail that we haven't gotten yet, so we'll be in touch.
What was requested of me last time with the class sizes, the special ed and the E&L numbers?
Yes, that's
That
been
was
shared
provided.
now. Yeah,
That
that's
was-
been shared now.
Yeah.
You got the breakdown that you asked for the second time?
Yes.
I can't go any more
Sure.
detailed than that, and that is
Okay,
the,
and then we're gonna
Yeah.
have collaboration with administration, principals and teachers in the room so we can figure out how to move forward with, class size will be a big part of the discussion, absolutely. But thank you for what's in front of us, because that's part of the decision making, so that's very helpful.
And part of what you were saying last time we were here was that class size on the national average were upwards of 28 in the classroom. And we said, it's never been that way in Suffern Central, and we would be looking for numbers around 20. That's been the idea the whole
so you
time.
have a sheet that shows you that most of our classes are
Right.
that. Not all of them, there's a few, 22, 23.
Mr. Karen?
Anthony, I was up visiting the robotics club last week, and I think it's a fantastic program. You know that they're going to the World Championship in Detroit, hopefully coming up, and it's really teaching new technologies. It's a 21st century program, okay, but it really can't be funded by the school at this point because it's a club. What about for next year, trying to incorporate it as a class? In other words, if there are teachers in the district who have the opportunity to, maybe do teach robotics and put them in there, and that would, defray in terms of layoffs. But it's a great program, and it really should be not only in the high school, it should be expanded to the junior high program, and there are programs in the elementary school for robotics which deal with Lego, okay? And it's a whole program that can move all the way through the district and make it really very successful.
Well, in K through 8, we teach robotics as part of either our science or technology curriculum. So it comes up in different places in the K-5 science curriculum, and it comes up in the technology classes in 6 through 8. At the high school, we offer a series of technology classes, which vary from in there how much programming they are versus other types of technologies. The robotics club, like many of our clubs, they're not the only club that faces this challenge,
Right.
is that as a club status, which many of the kids choose because then if it's a class, they can only take it once. They can't take it for 4 years. It doesn't fit in their schedule. It's only offered once a day, all kinds of, who's in those, some of those areas you get into a little bit of a gray area, again, about certification of the teacher, so what does it count as? But that part can
Right,
usually
can
be
we
worked
look at it
around.
and examine it and see if it's feasible, for next year?
And so the challenge is that club and club number 2 and club number 3 and club number 4 and club number 5 all want to be classes, and we already have a full load of classes. So the challenge is, how do we balance that, knowing that all clubs face this challenge that the district can't pay for them.
But this is a club that, in terms of 21st century, teaching math, everything, what was really great was seeing female students in the class, and that's something that, and they're going into engineering. Okay, the 4 students that I know of, 3 are going to major in engineering, and the other one is in computer technology. So I think the district really should think outside the box and maybe look at maybe making a class, making an elective and so forth, whatever. But, let's try to figure out how we can protect teacher positions, but also make it that the school district is really moving forward.
Thank you. Okay.
Employees retirement system rate, not as many, these are the civil servants, this is clerk staff, custodial staff, non-teaching positions, so much less of our salary base sits here. That rate is staying pretty flat. Obviously there are 6 tiers. The good news with the ERS rate is they've now come up with a tier 5, a tier 6. So really there are some things that are going to keep this rate going down probably more than going up all the time. So that might be something long-term as we look at trends, that this is a rate that will continue probably to go down. Health insurance, even with the good news we mentioned about benefits, it's still going up $1 million next year. So it is still a a major growth area in our budget, and we don't see that changing. We have segregated out, and we can, on your budget reports throughout the year, and obviously we can share with you again, that really our retiree cost is growing. And as we get retirements, yes, we save money on new teachers, but then we're paying health insurance for 2 people. So this is an area that we're going to have more bodies, more FTEs on our health plan, even if we have less FTEs in the classroom. That will continue to be a force that's going to have to be reckoned with going forward.
I just have a quick question for you.
Yep.
According to this graph, basically it was 1.2 this year that the increase was, and you were saying because the rates were better this year, and then we're seeing $1 million difference next year. But are these rates in for 1920?
Mm-hmm. Oh, in 1920, for the first half of the year.
Right.
They
So
change in
they're gonna go
January.
up. What I'm saying is just what I said before. Their co-pays went up, so I think that made their increase a little bit less. And I mean, you can look at the increase from last year was 1.4. The increase from the year before was 1.3, and then we're only counting 1 million as the increase. So I don't know if that's.
The Medicare rate was almost flat, right? That's, again, with the, I think what was best to show you each individual rate, because the Medicare, again, all the retirees that we paid for, that rate was flat.
But most of the retirees, would you say, are Medicare Prime, or are they
Some
not?
are Medicare plus one, some are still, anybody under 65.
Right,
still-
that's what I'm saying.
So, but we looked at the first 6 months of the year. What are we actually going to pay? We know what that is. We know that rate. And then the rate, they said, was going to go up about 5%. So that's what we're looking at, and that's why last year we budgeted a little higher than 5%. That's why. So this is budget. The last one is budget to budget. 'Cause we don't have the actual, obviously.
Right.
The others are actual.
So we're going to have fund balance. It's not going to come in at 18,920 this year. It's gonna
Probably a
come
little less.
A little less.
But that's your budget.
300,000.
But I
That's
feel
what you were
that number was calculated using 6 months of actual
And
and
6
6
months.
months of what they're projecting at this point. But like Anthony said, it could change. We get more and more updates. The same thing with TRS. That's why, we don't want to put that in right away. We get updates. We get other agencies that kind of put their 2 cents in. So we look for that over the months that we're doing this budget.
Okay, we discussed the TRS. Again, we're budgeting 98886 is where it's probably going to come in, at 5% on health. Debt services, since that's really the main hurdle we faced this year, and for those on the board a while, we've been kind of prepping you that this was going to be the year where, and you see it from this chart, debt service, the top line, well, our principal and interest payment, our mortgage payment, is the same next year. But the state aid directly related to that is down $2.3 million. That was our biggest hurdle this year, is that. The positive news is, next year, state aid stays flat, debt service goes down. Following year, again, a big drop in state aid, but a big drop in debt. So we kind of view this 3-4 year period as, and the nice thing is, for the last 4 or 5 years, we have been doing building projects without debt. So this just shows the state aid that's based on debt service. Our state aid for building projects you've approved in the last few years, roofs, HVAC, and the ones we're going to talk about today, that's going to be state aid with no debt at all. So we do feel that this is our period, this is our period we have to manage, but it is not something that's going to be with us more than 2 or 3 more years, and then we should have control of this part of our budget.
As long as we don't go out for more debt.
And we're not planning on it. Yeah. Reserves, I know this comes up occasionally. This helps me sleep at night, and this ultimately is what helps our balance sheet clearly, and also our financial position is strong because of these reserves. There is a debt service reserve you see at the bottom, and we are going to use $900,000 of that in this budget. But when you go back here, you'll see next year that debt service is going to drop $900,000. So, we're going to kind of get, at least for next year, we'll be held harmless on the debt without using that $900,000 of one-time revenue. And then we'll have to manage going forward we'll still have $600,000 left in the debt service reserve to help with 21-22, which will be the next year. And you can see that's in 2023. We've got 2 more years where we're going to see decent size drops. Okay, so those are reserves. Also, if you do quickly the math, there's, it's about $26, $27 million here. If we just get 2% on our reserves, that's $540,000. So if we don't draw a dollar out of reserves, our reserves go up $540,000.
Can I ask a quick question?
Yeah.
What happens if we lose the revenue from that, if the utility parcel assessments change to what we were warned about?
Yeah,
How are you factoring for that? Just
it's really not it's more among the taxpayers that issue is.
So your budget doesn't change at all, it's just the tax burden moves, but then the percentage you're talking about is higher.
So
Not the tax levy.
No, the tax rate. But I've spoken
The
to
individual,
Scott
yeah.
over the last, couple of weeks, trying to get a better
Yeah.
handle on that. And he said the worst case scenario would be about $2 million.
Right.
$2 million of actual tax that would have to be transferred to the taxpayers. But at the same token, they haven't made the decision, the state hasn't made the decision to do that yet.
Yeah, that's why we're advocating against it, we're just saying, how are you
We
planning?
appreciate that, we all are. But also what he said is that even if it happens, it's going to take at least a year or two to institute that. So we're not talking about something that's going to
Not
affect
this
us this
budget.
year, and probably not the next budget, the way he's referring to it.
Okay. Thank
So
you.
We're happy to see it wasn't in the governor's budget
Right.
at all.
Right.
So.
Right, and I think that made us all feel better when Scott said it could be a couple of years. There's still, and like you guys, or everybody that's advocating against that, that's huge for Suffern Central. It's not something that affects all the different districts in this county, but it affects us a lot. So it's really a great thing to watch.
And the taxpayers, it's very important to protect our
100%.
taxpayers. So.
Yeah. By the way, we're going to talk about capital a little later because we are recommending that we do capital work as we have the last few years. But you'll see there's already $1.4 million set aside for capital needs. That just has already been levied, has already sitting in our bank account.
And is it earmarked for certain projects?
No, we're going to earmark it now. Transportation, we showed that $600,000 figure, 300 additional students. I think we came up with 18 additional schools, some additional monitors for special ed placements, and that's what we're buying with our money. Large buses, vans. We're pretty full right now. Ms. Gessner has done a great job trying to squeeze what we can out of our seat capacity, but now growth has got to be accompanied by more vehicles.
Did you say that your projection for next year is 18 additional schools?
Yeah, see, it's part of it's during this year, but from when we built this budget
Right.
to, so over that 16, 18 months, we're thinking 18 more schools. Placements. Again, sometimes it's one child at Westchester in a special placement, but 18 additional places we have to go. So it's getting more and more complicated also. And a few years ago, the board approved a half-time additional position, kind of deal with the phone calls, deal with all the requirements of notifications. So we actually, we just filled that. But this is an area, not just dollars, but headaches and just needs. It's just, they're going to consume
So
more
I have a quick
time.
question on that too. When we were discussing possible redistricting conversations, this model where our elementaries become specialized of some sort of or another came up in conversation. That would create additional transportation needs, wouldn't it?
Yeah. Anytime you have
If you were to
anytime you have kids in the same neighborhood going to two different places.
Going to
Yeah,
additional
yeah.
places, and so that would add
Yeah,
a
so
burden
that
on the
would
budget as well.
definitely be right, so you weigh the educational.
Solving one problem, but
Yes.
creating another.
Yep.
Okay, I remember Ms. Isolde said, transportation's an issue. Thank
Yep.
you.
All right, facility initiatives. This is what's in the budget, so I'm not talking about using the capital reserve. You'll see a lot of them have safety, and we're not sure right now, we need kind of the assistance of the board as we work through it. We're looking at various PA overlays in our schools, ways to get messages out, not just inside the building, outside the building. We're looking at maybe using the phone system, the VoIP has a lot of capabilities. There's some overlays we can put over PA systems. we're not right now saying, here's the product we need, but we are saying, we're putting money in there and we think we can provide this product in all our buildings that'll greatly improve our communication. If there's any questions, I would refer to others on that. But so we heard that loud and clear, and we do think that we'll have a better, even better communications next year in that area. Painting, I'm a great believer in. It's not very expensive, and it really brightens the place up. We're going to do Cherry Lane and Viola hallways. We're going to improve the library in Viola. As over the years, we came to realize we have AC, we have air conditioning in almost all our classrooms. So with this budget, we're going to finish the job. There will, whether it's art, music, libraries, interchangeable classrooms, they should all have cooling by the start of the school year. So
Not every classroom does it? Is that
no, that's
the
what this will
goal?
provide. Yeah,
So every classroom.
right. I think the only ones that won't will
We
be.
have already done the majority of the classrooms have been air conditioned, and when either window units installed or they've been installed in the unit ventilators. We're down to probably about 25 classrooms now that are left that just need to be air conditioned.
In all buildings, 25 only left?
Yeah.
Bless you.
So it's just going to be gyms and one.
So like the big spaces aren't, the gyms, obviously, the cafeteria, the high school, the other cafeterias in the elementaries are air conditioned. The libraries are air conditioned, and for the majority of all the classrooms are air conditioned. And we've been kind of doing this over the last 5 or 6 years, doing a little bit at a time. It started with the 504 students with needs. But you know what? There is a need for this. I mean, you're working in an environment that is going to be conducive for everybody's health and air conditioning.
We had a rough season recently.
September was rough.
Absolutely.
That's why when we started looking at it, it's like, geez, look at it. Our gap isn't that great.
Yeah.
Let's
Okay,
fill
that's
it.
great.
We have been looking at Montebello, both the beginning and the end of school. Very landlocked piece of property, and obviously very busy. A lot of students, special ed placements, and the mix of cars and buses has been. We actually had, people with an architectural eye look at it, and we also, if you think about the property, you got a creek on one side, you have a big drop off on another. You got the track from the middle school, so you can't grow that way. So what we came up with, and we think it's going to greatly expand the safety improvements. The principal was on board, was to bring sidewalk down almost to the end of the road, almost to the road, and that would be where cars drop off. Cars would never come up into the circle. And that sidewalk, it's a long distance, and if, again, as you know the property, we have to put some stairs in up near the building, so it's about, what, 110,000? 130. So that's in there too, that's in the budget. Our goal is that this would be, in place at the start of the school year. And that's always been our most vexing problem, so we think it'll greatly improve that. Our playgrounds, we've been very fortunate. They were probably mostly funded initially through PTAs and local dollars, but they're getting old, they're getting tired. We started a playground improvement fund. We're kind of still tugging a little bit in between the two of us, but $75,000 is the number, and we also want to put a new, we like the either probably poured rubber as being the soft surface we're going to go with. And then over time, we'll just look, whatever's the worst will be the first ones we replace as far as actual units. But 75,000 does not go far. Just we're going to need about 8 to 10 years of that to go through all the elementaries.
Didn't they do something just relatively recently at Connor? They redid it with
they
money
did.
that came from Senator Jaffe,
Yes,
Senator
there was
Jaffe.
there was a grant that they did a playground improvement there, an apparatus.
Right.
That was just the apparatus, but the surfacing itself is still this 5R material, which is basically every year you have to keep adding 5R material, and of course it gets very costly. So the idea is the newer playgrounds, ones that still have some life to them, use a soft surface area or in place to have a soft surface area. So saying we eliminated the need for firework constantly every year. And it also, with having initiate this fund, it gives us the availability to start putting in new pieces here and there as we move on. And of course, we use, we have the playgrounds inspected every year. We use a medic, they come in, they'll do some assessments on that. Because once the age of the playground starts to get over the cost of the repairs of that, now it starts to kind of look. So that's what we wanted to do.
There's going to be a long-term initiative, but we're going to start it this year. And then I know there's been a discussion of solar, and the architects are available even as early as the next meeting to come in and kind of share what they've come up with, so some ideas. But everyone we talk to says the best thing you can do is first bring down your own loads, bring down what you need, electricity to power. And the biggest bang for the buck is LEDs in place of current fluorescence, and we're going to look to those 3 buildings, Salzburg, Concord, Chatelaine. We also do the ceilings at the same time, which you've seen, I think, in some of your walkthroughs in the past.
They look great.
Yeah, the revenue side of the budget, and this is really been our most vexing problem, is that, again, we knew the building aid was going to drop. General state aid, we're hoping that we get more out of Albany when this all is said and done. There's the $900,000 which we're using from the debt service reserve, which was not previously used. Health services, we got a little bit of, we've been in a little bit of a tug of war with East Ramapo regarding some billings. We were happy to hear the state ed actually agreed with our position, and we feel that's going to increase our revenues in that area. Interest on investments, we did bump it up. And that definitely is, we're hoping will be something that will stay at that level going forward. And tax levy at 2%, now 4%. Well, if you compare the 2 slides, expenditures and revenues, we're still $900,000 away. For what it's worth, last year at this time we were about $660,000 thereabouts when we did the same presentation. So things do happen. Retirements occur, the state budget. We're going to constantly be scrubbing expenses, see if there's any movements we can make. But we do think that's going to be the effort here. So we are still not to where we want to be, but we're happy with the initiatives. We want to still fund them. Obviously, we have a slide later. If the moment comes where we still have the gap, then we also have what our plan would be if there's still a gap. We discussed this last week, so I don't want to dwell on it, but our BOCES aid. We did a lot of one-time purchasing. We're still looking at possibly, we haven't gotten it all clear yet on buying down our copiers and help us on 2 fronts, reduce expenses, and also get us more BOCES aid. So that's the kind of thing maybe could help shrink some of that 973. Building aid we've kind of talked through. It's obviously been our biggest revenue decrease. We need more from the state. We're hoping that there is, the 2 houses are both saying there's more avails, there's the more money to spend, and we think a good amount of that will go to education funding. So last year we did get a pretty decent increase from the legislature, and we are due a lot in foundation. We're among the top 10% of districts who are shortchanged, so there's a good chance, hopefully some of that will come our way. And that's the reimbursements we get from BOCES, trans, and others. There's our shortfall. Obviously, we talked a little bit about next steps, but then also how to close the gap. We have some of the reserves. We don't treat it lightly. We may need to go there. Talked about BOCES aid. Maybe we bring the TRS rate down a little bit, although it's kind of like pick your poison. Hitting a reserve or reducing a rate that you know is probably going to go up. It's the same thing, really. But also, you notice we added a few staff requests. We added a network specialist. We reinstated a maintenance supervisor. Do you do those mid-year? Do you do them at all? You can look at the facility initiatives. Maybe you do one less school with the LEDs. And we put it all the way at the bottom because we're not going to recommend it. Obviously, we have the ability to go above 2% and still be below the tax cap, but we're not going to recommend that.
Thanks for that.
That could close a gap. Capital projects. What was it, 4 years ago now, the community approved a $10 million capital reserve fund. Earlier, we showed that there's $1.4 million sitting there. We've also, every year, we put $700,000 in the budget for capital. So back to those budget figures, there's 700 in there. So we feel both what we're doing in maintenance and keeping that 700,000 of capital in the budget, we're facilities as part of meeting this financial need. But we are saying we would like to spend an additional 1.6. So you take the 700,000 away from the 2.3 here for these various needs. And there's, these are kind of meat and potato stuff. We need a new transformer for Slopesburg. We've already been put on notice by O&R that if it goes, we'll be dealing with a truck providing temporary power to the building. So we may even declare an emergency for that, but we are including it in our capital plan. We can't wait another year. If we've always been very fortunate here, a very supportive community, but that work has to be done. The middle school facade, we took care of the emergency work last year. So this is truly repointing throughout the parapet walls, and you'll be seeing that over a few years. This is kind of what, half of the bite?
Yeah, that's about half the bite. We want to do like another phase 3 and phase 4 to that. We figured we had to add these other things in there as well, so it's not just everything at one shot, but we're going to remediate the most important things.
How many capital projects have we done in this building over the past couple of years? Because we're told there's like $2.2 million worth of capital projects that have to happen here.
Well,
have we earmarked some money for that, or have we started planning?
We think we
that?
should move out of this building. We think we should move out of this building. We don't think we should put $2.5 million into this building unaided. Plus, we had, there could be a generator of $300,000. So part of what you don't see there is Hillburn. We actually think as part of your plan, your redistricting and everything else, administration should go into our buildings. Where we know we can fit, the program should drive it. But that's why you don't see Hillburn on there, is we don't think it's worth putting money into this building.
Is this not a historic building?
It will remain a historic building. Well, whether we rent it, whether we mothball it, these are all decisions we're not going to, we just do not, we know the needs are here for a roof in the back, some foundation issues. Since there's no students in this building, we don't get any building aid in this building. No state aid follows the work in this building. So when we showed before a building aid ratio of almost 50%, obviously that would not apply to that. We also are sitting, we just got approval for generators in high school, middle school, and Hillburn. Well, why put another $300,000 generator in this building? So we really think this is the time that the board will look at this building. Their square footage wise, we know we can fit in.
Have we looked at possible grants, being it's a federal and state historical building? Have we analyzed
I don't know.
the possibility? Because that was the board's direction to the administration earlier this year. So it's been months where there could be funding out there, being that it's a historical site, and to, yes. Paul? Yes, go ahead.
All right, I guess it was in October, I went online, I started to look at it, I looked at this building, I tried to find out some history about this building. Obviously, there is a lot of history, but unless we're in New York City, and the last time I looked, we're not, probably the state of New York is not going to do anything for us. And in terms of a federal site, we aren't. Though Thurgood Marshall, Supreme Court, you would think that we would be.
I thought it was a state site and then became a federal site like a year or so ago. We can double fact check that.
It is.
Right, we would have to, but then,
We need to fact check.
yeah.
The other thing, where are you getting this information from? Because we went to a legislative dinner and spoke to Assemblywoman Jaffe personally.
Okay,
And
so
she
what's
said
she
that
say?
there was possible funds to be garnered from that.
Possible.
So, well,
Yeah.
nobody spoke to her about it. Has anybody from the district made any sort of attempt to try to get this information?
Just a point of
You looked on the
information.
internet, like what,
I think it's worth pursuing
Yeah,
for
but
sure.
people should be
Point of
looking into these
information
things
is
if
that
we're talking
you
about
really-
closing a building.
You really have to have a feasibility report on the building and the possibility. With regard to Thurgood Marshall and so forth, there's a fantastic opportunity to turn at least part of the building, and particularly the lower part, into a museum and name the building whatever after him. There are lots of grants out there. This is one of the reasons why I've tried to push for a grants writer. Those are where you have to, basically see what's available. And a lot of people don't realize Thurgood Marshall and his impact, not here only in Hilburn, but in the entire U.S. And the idea to hire a grants writer, you can do it in terms of percentage, whatever the case may be, but let's do a feasibility study and then find out what can be. Okay, that's all.
Because that's what goes along with making the possible funds come to you as hard cash. Because very similar to what happened with the full-day pre-K, where I'm told, I wasn't on the board then, that the numbers were requested in February of 2018, and we got them in February 2019. So, I mean, there seems to be some sort of disconnect here with the way that we are going after these funds that are available to us,
All right, so-
in my opinion.
All right, so
humbly.
Ellen Jaffe might have some information about this, that's what we're
She's
saying.
been spoken to about it, and if
If
we
you'd like to follow
have,
up, that would be
Yeah,
great.
yeah.
Yeah, that would be wonderful.
as she was
You can
given
share the numbers.
information
Yeah, I'll
regarding,
put you in touch.
yeah, she's
absolutely.
been given information regarding the pre-K now that we got.
As far as pre-K, it's in her request to the governor on this current budget to try to fund our pre-K. We don't know if we'll get it, but she put in a request on our behalf with the numbers that Dr. Adams and Mrs. Weber shared. So that's the update on that.
Well, that's why right now we've at least foregone putting more money into this building.
Okay. I have a question. None of the vestibules and the security-related projects are on this. Are they still, we're waiting for state approvals, correct?
Yeah, the plans have already been completed, just waiting to have plans
Right.
back from the architects,
And
and
is it-
it's sent to state ed.
Okay. And they wouldn't come at any cost? They're
We've already put money
finished.
aside. Yeah, that money's been put aside.
That's
It's
already
been,
put
it's,
aside.
Yeah.
okay, thank you.
We are a little worried, by the way, of some budget creep with capital projects. As months turn into years, and,
The cost
tariffs,
of
steel,
goes up.
and so, but we still, right now, we're not coming to you saying we need any more funds for any of those.
Thank you.
But we did build just, a little cushion in here for the inevitable escalation that's going to occur by the time some of this work's done. The only other thing I'd point out here is the middle school age-appropriate play area. I don't know if you have that,
Eric,
Eric, where are we?
the video?
there.
Yeah, wanted to just show you, Brian Fox brought this to us in one of the budget discussions, and we thought it was kind of neat, and we put it in there.
So this is going to be the middle school age appropriate play.
Tommy out music.
Tommy, let's go.
Yeah, right.
Let's race.
Yeah,
So obviously, there are different apparatus
That's
that you
what
can
I
use in this program. This is from, the Colts actually sponsored this, as you saw, there was and you have those coats on. But you could do different apparatuses put in there, and it's kind of like an outside sensory hallway for the middle school. When Brian brought it to us, we thought it was absolutely fantastic.
Yeah, I mean, there's a space he has, which he could speak to, where it's kind of dead space right now.
Sure.
So it's
Where is
not
it
like
gonna
you
be
lose the
put?
field.
I'm sorry.
It'll be in the middle school. Do you know where he's gonna put
Where
it?
in the middle school?
By the salt shed.
Oh, yeah, sure.
Oh, on top.
Yeah,
Okay.
the field. Yeah.
Nice
Along,
part
right along
about
Ambient, Mike.
This
Yeah.
is, we can tie this project in with the track as well as the facade and be able to get state aid.
Yeah, it's actually delegatable, just like any
That
playground.
sounds good.
Yeah, so.
That sounds very good.
Yeah, can we put lights on it?
Fund it, we're in.
So I could go at night?
I like it. We're putting a fence around it, I know
No,
that
big
much.
fence will lock for you.
See if the Colts will pay for it.
Yeah, right.
Like,
Board retreat fund.
If you
Okay,
could send a fence, you could do that.
so,
So really, it's just a summary, talking 2% tax levy, 1.48 budget, we still have work to do.
Yep.
Bring this in, obviously, we gotta answer your questions, and if you're looking for additions, questions about sections and so on, that's part of what the next 6 weeks brings, and, but we feel it's a manageable point at this point, and, any answer
thank
any
you
other
very much
questions?
for all your work on this. We appreciate it.
Yeah, the community know that. We're also looking at solar panels.
Yes.
With regard to the roofs and so forth.
Yeah, and that's.
Everybody stretch a little bit, we're just about to start our meeting, so.